Good afternoon from Portland, Oregon, USA. It is Friday, May 5th, 2023, and welcome to the MMA Eco live podcast where we talk about all things Asian MMA. I'm your host, Chris Presnell. I am the owner and sole employee of MMA Ecosystem. But we're fixing to have a good time today on the podcast. I've got a mug of some Cascadia coffee, local place here in Portland that my wife is actually the manager of. Just brewed a fresh AeroPress of this coffee, and I'm ready to go. If you have not already, go ahead and subscribe to the channel. Give a thumbs up on this video if you're enjoying it. Would love to have you on the ride for future shows and future videos that I post on this channel. Today, we're going to be running down the weekend's events in Asian MMA. In particular, one Fight Night 10 going down in less than an hour from a suburb of Colorado, Broomfield, or a suburb of Denver, sorry. And then we've also got RIZIN 42 going down later tonight. We've got UFC 288, got Xiaonan fighting on that card. We've got Deep and a couple other little odds and ends here and there. So let's get into it, shall we? First off, I want to hit up and talk about one Fight Night 10. So that is going down in just a matter of minutes from the First Bank Arena. And it should be a really, really interesting show. One of the most important shows that one championship has ever put on because they're trying to break into that US audience, kind of the true like mainstream of MMA. I know MMA is a decentralized sport, but you know, the UFC being based in the US, most of the UFC's events are based in the US. It's built sort of a hub, even though that is changing, and other countries around the world are also growing as MMA fan bases. But they definitely want to get that market share of the US fan base on their side. Previously, they've had probably more of a hardcore following from the US, but of course they have the Amazon Prime deal to where they can air in prime time on Friday nights here in the US. That was the first big step of getting that US audience. And now they are going a lot bigger. Who knows if we'll see any more shows from them in the US this year? Of course, that is definitely kind of constricted by their rule set in a way, because as of now, Colorado is the only state of the 50 states to approve the rule set for one championship. Doesn't mean they couldn't continue holding more and more events there, either in the First Bank Arena, in the Pepsi Center, I think, which is in Denver, if it's still called that. But yeah, we'll see what they do, and I don't know. I guess metrics of whether or not this show goes well would definitely be viewership on Amazon Prime, how well it's shared. It seems like the media has definitely done its part to talk about this event the last couple weeks. So definitely seems to be getting a little bit more of a pop. The main event between Demetrius Johnson and Adriano Moraes is a big one. It's definitely like two of the best flyweights. I'm going to call them like pseudo flyweights because it's flyweight, but it's not really flyweight because of the hydration. So they don't always, Demetrius Johnson cutting to 125 pounds may not fight the exact same way Demetrius Johnson fights at 135 pounds. So, some debate there of if it is actually flyweight or not, but either way, really important fight. A lot of really important fights on this card. A little kind of like a little bit of a diamond that has a lot of different facets that you can kind of turn it and look at a lot of different angles to this card. I did figure out finally how to get my screen up in action. So let me just let me share this card with you all, and we can kind of run down it real quick. So, of course, in the main event, we've got Demetrius Johnson fighting Adriano Moraes. Got Rod Tang on the card. Got Mikey Musumeci defending his belt. Stamp Fairtex versus Elise Anderson. Roberto Soldic fighting Sebastian Kadestam. Sage Northcutt making a huge return, and we'll see if it's a flop or if it's Sage Northcutt 2.0. He's fighting a very important Pakistani fighter, Ahmed Mushtaba, probably the most notable name out of Pakistan at the moment. Also got Onglan Song fighting Fan Rong, sorry. Rainier de Ritter is in a grappling fight. Got Jackie Buntan versus Deandra Martin, Kyra Akhmatov versus Reese McLaren, and Lowen Tainanis versus Okray Yoon. You know what? As I was looking at this card, what I really like about this card from an MMA standpoint is that a lot of fighters who are sort of like the key like banner carrier for their country are on this card. So, of course, if you think about Stamp Fairtex, she's probably the most important fighter in MMA out of Thailand right now. Could change in the near future if you get a Top Noi and a couple other of those Thai fighters into the UFC. But Stamp Fairtex is killing it right now, and she has built a very significant portion of Thai MMA at the moment. Also got Roberto Soldic. He is probably the most important fighter from Croatia at the moment. As I said, Ahmed Mushtaba from Pakistan, Ongla and Song pretty much single-handedly at the moment carrying MMA for Myanmar. And so, yeah, and then, Kyra Akhmatov, he's not the most popular fighter from Kazakhstan right now, but for one championship, he's probably the most notable fighter for them right now. So, and you could maybe say Okray Yoon, most important fighter out of South Korea on the male side in one championship right now. So former title holder holds a win over Christian Lee, the champion. So a lot of really important fights on this card. At first, I kind of wondered if they were just going to keep building it. You think about like the Tokyo show that they've had, where they, 1 Century, where they just have this like kind of 2-part 26 fight card that's just stacked from top to bottom. This fight is only 11, or this event is only 11 fights. That's probably in part due to the Amazon structure of things. Weren't just going to build endlessly there, and I don't feel like you need to have a 20 fight card for it to be important, but it did kind of feel like I was expecting it, and then they just kind of stopped building it. But I'm happy with this card. I think it's going to be a lot of great fights. There's some decent grappling fights, some good Muay Thai fights, and of course a lot of really great MMA fights as well. Kyra Akhmatov, you can make a case he is definitely the number one contender for the flyweight belt. Potentially can fight the winner of the main event. Although that is to say, if Demetrius Johnson sticks around, been hinting at retirement, it's kind of been up in the air. It seems like it's just kind of on him to fight this fight, and then we'll see what he says. Don't know if it's contingent on him winning or losing. So we'll see what happens. If Demetrius Johnson retires, we could very well be getting an Adriana Moraes versus Kyra Akhmatov fight, should he win against Reese McLaren tonight. So that's definitely one of the top storylines to watch here. Stamp Fairtex, I'm always interested. She kind of hops around from Muay Thai kickboxing and MMA, and she's gotten really close to we still haven't seen her fullest potential. She's still growing, but getting a lot better, and she's still really young. Let's just see how old Stamp Fairtex is and kind of look at her record and where she stands right now. So I think things are a little slower since I am doing a lot, the old laptop. So Stamp Fairtex, 25 years old, just 25 years old. She's fought all of her pro MMA fights for one championship, has a 9-2 record, which is pretty good, all things considered, that she has fought a lot of pretty good competition considering what has been available to her. She's fought, fighters like Aliana Rasokina. She's fought Julie Mezbarbara, Ritu Foga, Angela Lee, Jean Radzuan, and been successful on a lot of these Muay Thai and kickboxing fights as well. So a shame that Anissa Mexen fight couldn't come together. That could have been really interesting. But yeah, we've got her taking on Elise Anderson. Elise Anderson, who is unranked, but a pretty decent fighter, a pretty good grappler in her own right. So should be an interesting fight. Also, we've got the Ongla and Song fight versus Fan Rong, and I think that should be pretty interesting. I think we're probably most of us are picking Ongla in this fight, right? I mean, Rong. Okay, is it Fon Rong Fan or is it Fun Rong? Okay, it's Fan Rong. Okay, family name Fan, last or given name Rong. So Fan Rong. So this fight was supposed to happen a couple months ago, I think, maybe at the January Amazon Prime show. It fell out, and then they rescheduled it for this card. I think this fight should, at the very least, it's this matchup. This fight is there to be really entertaining. Both guys throw a lot of heat, and it should be a lot of fun. Probably a pretty crazy fight. So I think most of us are picking Ongla to win in this fight, but don't count out some of these heavy-handed Chinese strikers. So that should be an interesting fight. All right, so next, let's go to this RIZIN show, which that should say RIZIN 42. Let's go ahead and fix that. All right, so RIZIN 42 goes down from Tokyo later tonight. That starts in about, let's see, 6.5 hours or so. That'll start. And one fight that I am really interested in is this Ramazan Timurov fight. So he was supposed to fight another guy. Instead, he got rebooked against Fighting Nexus flyweight champion Yuta Hamamoto. Timurov, it's actually his story is a little bit interesting because he came up through China. He got signed by WLF and he fought there several times. I think he went 6-1 there. His only loss was actually to Cholun. So he did very well in WLF. Of course, he's an Uzbek guy, got a pretty strong wrestling base, so was able to really rely on that. But I'm curious to see how he does in RIZIN. It's interesting because RIZIN, unlike One Championship, RIZIN has sort of mostly stayed with the Japanese focus, and I think that's smart for them. I don't think that they necessarily need to branch out and try to sign everybody yet. But it's interesting always to see what kinds of fighters they sign from outside of Japan. Of course, they've got guys like Roberto Satoshi Souza. They've got John Dodson in there. They signed Johnny Case in the past. And then they've got this guy, Ramazan Timurov, who honestly is one of the only fighters that they've signed from the Central Asia region. No Kyrgyz or Kazakh guys on the roster, at least that I'm aware of. So really interesting. Will be interesting to see how he fares against a lot of the Japanese fighters. Think back to that Bellator RIZIN show where you had a lot of really good wrestlers fighting the RIZIN guys, and ended up kind of shutting out the Japanese guys because of they're able to really rely on their wrestling. I know that's a really simplistic way to put it, but it'll be interesting to see how someone like him fares in RIZIN. And he's got a lot of experience fighting in East Asia already, so that's one fight I am really looking forward to. Also on this card, we've got, of course, John Dodson's back. He is a lot of fun. He was really fun in his RIZIN debut. Got Roberto De Souza fighting Spike Carlisle. That should be really interesting. Spike Carlisle and RIZIN is awesome. And then kind of a random fight in the co-main event, we've got Juan Arculeta back for more in RIZIN against Naoki Inoue. So Inoue, he's a rising Japanese prospect, 16-3, and then you've got Juan Arculeta back in there. It's a really weird and random fight, and if this goes to the mat, I'll be really interested to see how this goes, just with their two styles of grappling. Then, of course, in the main event, we've got Kai Asakura fighting Yuki Motoya. That should be fun as well. Overall, the landmark card last weekend, I almost felt like could have been an even stronger card than this one, but this one should be great. Like I said, it airs on Fight TV in about 6.5 hours. So unless you're watching this on the replay, then it has probably already happened. So we've also got RIZIN this weekend. That should be fun. And then in Cage Warriors, probably one of the only times Cage Warriors has been talked about with Asian MMA. And why is that? Because your guy, Graham Boylan, the CEO of Cage Warriors, started a little something called the MMA Academy. Basically, a system where he picks fighters from certain countries around the world, brings them to San Diego to train at Studio 504, and tries to get them on Cage Warrior shows or shows in the area, and then kind of a scholarship kind of program. He's done that with Italy. I believe there is an Afghan fighter in the program, and then there's several Indonesian fighters. Graham Boylan is basically like investing heavily in Indonesia because there's I don't know how many Indonesian fighters he brought over from to San Diego, but it's a lot. All those Road to UFC fighters from Indonesia are part of that MMA Academy. And then there's two guys fighting tomorrow at Cage Warriors in Rome that are Indonesian guys as well. Those will be Yoga Prabowo fighting Andre Tischenko and Cornelius RJ Aritonang versus John Kula on Cora. So, sorry, stop sharing my screen there. So we've got those two. That's really interesting. Probably the first time an Indonesian fighter has fought in Italy. Very interested to see what the vibe of that is. I believe in a month on the next Cage Warriors show that's in San Diego. There's also a fighter from that Indonesian group fighting there. The Afghani guy, I believe his name is Milad Ahadi. He is fighting in Cage Warriors San Diego. So I'll be watching that, seeing how they do. I think these are pretty low level fights, so it's good just to be able to get them experience. So the thing is if you're an Indonesian fighter, and as it is right now, Indonesian fighters, they pretty much only fight other Indonesian fighters. One Pride MMA so far has kind of controlled the Asian or the Indonesian MMA scene. That's starting to change a little bit with some of these shows like Island Fight League, and then what's Bali MMA, Sanggu Fight Night. They're starting to have some shows there where they're able to get some of their local guys to fight fighters from other places as well. But generally, if you really want fighters from a certain country to be able to be ready for the big show, they need to get experience against lots of different looks. They need to have the opportunities to fight in other countries and have that on ramp to the big show. If you're only fighting fighters with similar backgrounds as you, then you're not forced to really examine your whole game and branch out. So very excited for this Cage Warriors show. That brings me to UFC 288 tomorrow night. Of course, headlined by Henry Cejudo fighting Aljamain Sterling. But also on the pay-per-view, our lone Asian fighter on the card is Xiaonan. Of course, Zhalgas Zhumagulov was supposed to fight on the prelims against Rafael Estevam, but Estevam had some weight-cutting issues today, and that fight has been scratched. So our lone Asian on the card is Yan Xiaonan. She is fighting Jessica Andrade at strawweight. A lot of people looking at this fight as a possible way for Yan Xiaonan to secure a title shot further down the line later this year. And I definitely see it that way. Is the same title shot on the line for Jessica Andrade? Might depend on how the fight goes. And I don't think it's as much of a lock for Jessica Andrade if she were to win, but I do think if Jan can beat Andrade, then she's got it, definitely. Especially, I still think that the UFC wants to book Zhang Wei Li versus Amanda Lemos sometime this summer, and then what I'm hearing now for the next China show is that it's probably going to go down in December. Of course, nothing official, no venues booked yet, but that's the most likely month for that, and that makes sense for all the other timelines, right? If Zhang Wei Li defends her title either late July or in August, perhaps she could defend it again in December, and then also with Road to UFC, most likely you're looking at like August for if they go to Singapore for the second round of the tournament, and then the last round of the tournament could be at that China show in December. So that's sort of a sample timeline for you. That's the latest I've heard is December. So of course, there's no better situation for the UFC than Zhang Wei Li versus Yan Xiaonan for the title in December in like a Shanghai or a Beijing. So uh, that's definitely what they want. And rolling the dice a little bit with having Yan Xiaonan fight Andrade, because we all know how dangerous Andrade is. But of course, it's strawweight. Every fight is a tough fight at the top of the division. So um, yeah, I think it is a winnable fight for Jan. I think it's a close fight. I think a lot of people are probably counting out Andrade a little bit, just since she fought Erin Blanchfield in her last fight and didn't look totally herself. So she's coming off a loss, and I think because Jan's coming off a win, Andrade is coming off a loss, and she's also dropping down to strawweight from flyweight. She fought her last fight at flyweight, so um, yeah, could be interesting. I lean towards Yan Xiaonan in this fight, but some things about Jessica Andrade don't totally match up. I mean, we saw how well Yan Xiaonan could defend submissions from Mackenzie Dern, and so I'm not too worried about Yan on the ground. Basically, how this fight could play out is if Andrade is aggressive, closes the distance, and able to land some power shots on Yan versus Yan able to use her footwork. And you know, how is Yan going to win this fight? Most likely because of volume. So I'm not necessarily an analyst. I don't take deep dives into these, but that's just what my gut is saying. I think that Yan will probably be able to win this on the feet, but Andrade, very tough. Next up, we've got Deep is having a show on Sunday, May 7th. That's Deep 113 Impact. And in the main event of this event is Ryuya Fukuda versus Ryusuke Honda. Let me just pull up this card. Wasn't on the plan here, but let me just let's just take a look here. Hop into the wonderful world of Tapology, and I will share my screen. All right, so this is a pretty big fight for Japanese MMA, I'll say. This is the flyweight, as you can see on this lovely poster, with a lot of color on there. This is the finals of a flyweight tournament that Deep has been having over the last year or so. So a guy that I've had my eye on for a while is this guy, Ryusuke Honda. He's another really young, or I guess he's not that young. He's 32 years old. Either way, he is a guy that I've had my eye on for a while now. He has looked pretty good recently. He's fought some pretty good competition: Yuki Ito, Takahashi Matsuba, and Haruo Ochi. I've heard a lot about this guy, and I think he should probably take this. He's going to be fighting Ryuya Fukuda. can see there those two losses, Makoto Takahashi and Tetsuro Taira. So fighting a lot of good competition as well. Been fighting with Deep, mostly one fight for RIZIN there. But that's a pretty important fight with Japanese MMA. I'll be watching that. And then, of course, you've got a lightweight championship, Juri Ohara. Ohara recently fought with Black Combat and won in their kind of showdown, Deep versus Black Combat. So Ohara, he is their lightweight champion, 32 years old there, and he took on Yoon Da-won at Black Combat, and then he's also fought for RIZIN. So very well traveled. He will be fighting Hiroto Isako in the co-main event. And then a couple other just like odds and ends. Also got Alash Pride, a Kazakh promotion, going down this Sunday. Also got on tomorrow a couple fights from One Pride MMA. These are not live fights. These are fights from One Pride 67 that already happened last month. But a couple of fights going down there on their YouTube channel. And then just to touch real quick on some Road to UFC stuff. If you follow me on social media, this isn't news for me to say this now, but of course, Ija was left without an opponent when Abdul Azim Badakshi backed out. I don't know why Badakshi is out of Road to UFC. Haven't heard anything on that, but he was out. They looked around for a couple opponents. I heard a couple names that they offered to that couldn't take it, and eventually they landed on Wuzatsabieka Jehefu, who's another Chinese fighter. He is of Kazakh ethnicity, and he's like one of the most well-versed, like experienced Chinese fighters on the scene right now. I believe he's 30 years old. Someone told me today that he was 33. But yeah, he's very well traveled. Just got in the win column last weekend at Dongjunga Fight. So he's fought absolutely everywhere: WLF, JCK, Bullet Fly FC, Jingwu Mun, literally everywhere in China. He's fought just about everybody, and he's very good. He's of course a good grappler. He fought in a JCK main event, I believe, recently against Liu Zong, and lost a pretty close fight. It was a really great fight. Of course, Liu Zong, guy that I've been high on for a long time, but lost a decision to him. That was back in March. So definitely a worthy fighter to enter Road to UFC. He is 30-11-1. I looked at his record earlier today, and he fought like 24 times in a span of 3 years between 2016 and 2018. So definitely one of those guys that has kept up a ridiculous schedule. And either way, just his experience alone and just everything that he's done, he's going to be a tough test for anybody in Road to UFC. So happy to see him in there. And, you know, people were asking, why wasn't this guy or that guy asked to be in Road to UFC as a replacement? And I think part of that is just because of the visa situation, right? It's hard to get a visa to China on less than a month's notice. So that's why I think it made a lot of sense to go with another Chinese fighter. So yeah, that fight going down. Don't know the exact dates on Road to UFC, if you know how they're going to divide these fights. Also, the time zones could kind of shift things around a little bit too, if it's on the 26th and 27th or on the 27th and 28th. So yeah, keep an eye out for that fight. Let's get into your questions, shall we? Man, y'all love to ask about Weili fighting Carla. What do you think of Yan Xiaonan saying that Weili didn't face the best version of Carla Esparza? Could be true. Hard to know. It's hard to really know what the best version of Carla is, but she definitely didn't look like her best. The thing is like Yan Xiaonan has seen Carla Esparza at her best. Carla Esparza literally has a win over Yan Xiaonan by TKO, and it didn't seem like Carla was firing on all cylinders that night. So James, you saying Carla would have lost to Weili if they fought 100 out of 100. You think it's Xiaonan security being dominated? No, I don't think so. Um, yeah, I don't think so. Elephant in the room. Why is one going to Elevation? Haven't they seen what other MMA events go there and people just gas? Well, part of that is it's all about the commission, right? If one championship wants to come to the US, they have a rule set that is not approved by the ABC, the American Boxing Commission. However, each state can also approve certain rule sets. You know, we see this with the Kansas Commission, with the Florida Commission approving open scoring. Every state kind of adopts their own, not their own rule set, but they have the option to adopt other rule sets as part of what they do there. So Colorado approved the one championship global rule set, which has the whole weight and hydration system. It has the knees to the knees to the head of a grounded opponent, the judging system, all that stuff with one championship. And Colorado was the first state to approve that. So I know one championship is also going around to other states. I think I remember Rich Franklin saying maybe Louisiana and Georgia were other states that seemed like they could be open to it. So the thing is, and very interesting news coming out this week. I believe it was MMA Junkie that posted a story with one of the guys that works for the ABC. The ABC was very upset with Colorado approving the one championship global rule set because of the knees to the head of a grounded opponent. They felt like it was backwards. I know I'm kind of quoting out of my head here, but they felt like it was going backwards a little bit. They didn't think it was a good idea. And Colorado commission basically responded by saying, you know, we don't have any evidence that like this is incredibly more dangerous to a fighter's health to allow these. So interesting that there was some sort of civil drama between one of the state commissions and the kind of like the governmental agency as well. So that's why they're going to Colorado. I know it is a little bit risky going to Elevation. It's like Colorado. So like, so I've been to Colorado probably 30, 40 times in my lifetime. And Denver is, so Broomfield is a suburb of Denver. It's north of Denver. And technically like, it's on the plains, but it slowly rises. Then just west of Denver is where the Rocky Mountains actually start. So it's not in the mountains, but it is close. It's sort of on the high plains, a little around a mile of elevation. So it's not super intense if you're not in the best of shape. And you know, it always confounded me when the UFC would go there with like a light heavyweight or heavyweight main event, and it's just always a little bit confounding to me some of their matchmaking for those cards. But we'll see how one championship does. A lot of smaller fighters there, so I guess we'll have to see how it goes, right? Alrighty. So, best way to improve media to promotion relations. Jack Slack said on his podcast that if you need a press pass from the promotion to make content, then you have no interesting opinions to begin with, since the media members will not ask the hard hitting questions. Not you specifically, but people are afraid to address the Dana White hitting his wife. The best way to improve relations, I think even in asking that question, media companies have to decide. They have to decide what's really important to them, right? Is going to UFC events more important to them than being able to ask any question that they want? Or is retaining their journalistic integrity and being able to ask any question they want, is that the most important thing? You know, look at someone like Ariel Helwani. He doesn't care that he doesn't get to go to UFC events. He's able to do what he wants to do. I'm sure he'd like to go to UFC events. He would welcome that. But yeah, I think as media, you have to decide what you want to do, what kind of business you're in here to do. And I think, you know, I've applied for UFC press passes before. I did not expect to get them. That's kind of like there's not a lot of spots reserved for that, and that goes to uh, people that the UFC knows and trusts. Not, I'm not even saying they're always like qualified media, but it goes to the MMA junkies, the um, MMA mania, MMA fighting kind of stuff. So yeah, the best way to improve relations, I think, just like be professional, and you have to decide what you want to do. And I think it's okay as a media member for you to say like, I'm not necessarily in here to stir the pot. If I can just like get time with fighters and ask a certain set of questions, make my kind of content. A lot of the content that I want to make isn't going to ruffle anybody's feathers, and I don't feel like I'm sacrificing anything for that. So for me, I don't feel like I have to like tiptoe around things and like not ask the hard hitting questions in order to fully pursue what I want to do. So, and I think that's fine. And but if I did work for like a bigger company, yeah, I would want to ask those hard hitting questions. But just got to ask what you want, what's important to you. All right. Opinions about when Xiaonan said that Weili and Jessica Andrade are similar fighters. I've asked several analysts, and they have said that the only thing similar is they both have power. I think, yeah, I think I see why they would say that. They do both have a lot of power in the hands. They're both great strikers, but Zhang Weili comes from a Sanda background, which is a lot of the same giftings as Muay Thai. Uh, Not necessarily an inherent grappling background, but she's been able to bring that up. Whereas Jessica Andrade, more of a Muay Thai background, and then a very good Brazilian Jiu Jitsu background as well. So definitely some different styles there. I mean, they're both very physical, uh, really good strikers, all of that. But Andrade, she's gone up to flyweight, even to bantamweight, and I think a lot more aggressive than Zhang Weili. Kind of leads the dance a little bit more, but um, yeah, I think their styles are pretty different. If you were to ask me, both Slack and Elbow have said Whaley is way more technical. Andrade is just brute strength. Are they? I think we're all lying if we say Andrade doesn't have technique. You don't become a champion of strawweight just off of brute force. Asking about Xiaonan trying to make headlines by talking about Zhang Weili. I mean, everyone does that, right? Every contender in their divisions talk about their champions, and they may talk crap, they may give the respect, but like if you're trying to get a title shot, you gotta have some things to stand on. You gotta not just have your work in the cage, but like you gotta make people want that fight. And a lot of times by doing that, you have to talk about the champ. Got to talk about how you match up with them. Esther Lil talking about when is the UFC going back to Singapore? Got to go last year, and lots of people from Beijing came there to watch Weili, and the atmosphere was electric. Love to go again since I moved to Singapore. Yeah, I do know that the UFC is trying to get back to Singapore this year, and I think probably the target for that is August or September. Could be a pay-per-view event, could be a fight night event. Don't know, haven't heard anything either way on that, but I have heard from a couple folks that a couple managers that the UFC is looking to get back to Singapore probably late summer or early fall. So let's hope for that. Let's see. Don't think this is fair. What's your opinion on the matter? Bloody Elbow presents podcast after every Weili when they question if USADA's testing her. Yeah, I haven't heard that. I haven't heard that. It always irritates me when people bring up like drug testing with the fighter, because like uh, there's no, people don't have any proof. If they say a fighter's on steroids, they have no proof. Honestly, when people make the steroids claim on a fighter, it to me just kind of sounds like they can't really like detract from the fighter, so they just have to like throw the steroids thing out there. So, and I feel like it happens a lot more often with women than men too. If I'm just being honest. Hey, WMMA scene, you're, you're at the First Bank Arena for One Fight Night 10, folks. There are people literally at One Championships U.S. debut with their phone out on this live stream. Crazy. You think you could live stream that for us? No, I've got Amazon Prime. I don't need to do that. But did you know that Marina Rodriguez turned down a fight with Weili at 275 in Singapore? She was offered this fight before Xiaonan was. You can confirm this with Drake Riggs. I haven't heard that. That's really interesting. Reason for declining was that she didn't have time to prepare since she just fought Xiaonan in March. I mean, yeah, that's a pretty quick turnaround. I know some people say that if you get offered a title fight, then you have no choice but to accept it because it's your golden ticket. But I can also understand if you feel like that's like a short turnaround time. And the other thing is injuries, right? If you come out of a fight with Yan Xiaonan in March, you're offered a fight in mid-June, and you have some injuries to get over, you want to be at your best. And I can totally understand a fighter for turning that down. I mean, I know again, it's like your golden ticket. People will disagree with me, but like, you know yourself, you know your body and what you're capable of, and I I I can respect that, honestly. And then, Makoto also asking about Rodriguez getting a title shot, even though she had a decision streak. Do you think she don't? Do you think she did deserve it in the first place? Uh, Honestly, I think. Oh, and sorry, I was thinking that that fight with Joanna was a title fight. That wasn't a title fight. So, uh, yeah, I think I still stand by what I say about turning down the fight for on 3 months' notice. I don't really mind if a fighter has a decision streak. It depends on how they look and who they're fighting. If they're fighting the best, most likely you're going to have a higher volume of decisions, and I don't really mind that, honestly. And asking if I believe that the strawweight title picture has been messed up since John was pushed to get a title shot instead of deserving Marina. John hasn't fought and isn't even training. Uh, well, she is training. That's the thing, and she did. She beat Joanna last June, and then she fought 5 months later in November against Carlos Barza. So the time frame was a pretty normal turnaround time, and some people were saying other people should have got the title shot. I didn't really mind it. Zhang, she's been at the top of the division for a while, and whether it was Rose or whether it was Zhang or Marina Rodriguez, I didn't really mind one way or the other. I know I'm probably a little bit biased since it's exciting for me to get to watch the Asian fighters in the main events or in title fights, but I didn't mind it too much. Yeah. So you mentioned the MMA Academy from the UFC. I heard the coaches at the UFPI US gosh UFCPI Shanghai cannot corner the fighters they help train. Isn't that counterintuitive? Yeah. So the thing is so MMA Academy that's not sponsored by the UFC. That's a Graham Boylan thing, who runs Cage Warriors, and Cage Warriors that's not run by the UFC, obviously. The UFC PI is run by the UFC, and so there's a little bit of a conflict of interest if UFC employees are cornering their own fighters in a fight. So I can see why that is. The aim of the PI in Shanghai is not for it to be like a permanent gym for fighters to like permanently switch to there and train there. It's meant to sort of just be a focused place for fighters to be able to come from their home gym to the PI to train for a little while, then potentially go back to their home gym throughout China. So it's a little bit different. And although, it is interesting because if I remember, Dean Amasinger cornered some of the fighters at Dana White's Contender Series. So I don't know if that was like Contender Series versus UFC thing. They're both Contender Series is basically the UFC, but just not because of the branding. So a little interesting with that, but yeah, I can see why they would do that. It is a little bit of a conflict of interest, and things get a little bit weird when UFC employees are cornering UFC fighters, in my opinion. Uh, okay, so yeah, good question. What does Song Yadong need to improve if he wants to defeat the top people at 135 pounds division? I thought he was sharp against Simone, but some of his past performances were not so good. Yeah, I'm probably not the best person to give feedback on this, but his last performance against Ricky Simone gave me a lot of hope for him to not be able, or not just enter the top 5 of the division, but be able to stay there. So past performances, he struggled a little bit with some of the wrestling, but his wrestling defense was lights out against Ricky Simone. Even if he was taken down, he was able to get right back to his feet. That looked pretty good. His cardio looked a little bit better. Some of it seemed to wear down a little bit when we're talking about like the Corey Sandhagen fight. Of course, he also had a busted up nose, so try breathing with a busted up nose. But the top of the division has some pretty good wrestlers, grapplers. You've got, of course, Henry Cejudo back in the mix. You've got Aljamain Sterling, another good wrestler and grappler. You've got Marab, who might be one of the fiercest, like just one of the most intense wrestlers in all of the UFC in terms of pace and athleticism. So you're not going to be able to beat Marab at his own game. You're not. So how can you prepare for that? Song Yadong, one of his standout attributes is his reflexes. So his hands are incredibly fast. His reaction times incredibly sharp, and I think that he's at one of the very best gyms that he could be at. He's around a lot of really good wrestlers. He's got Uriah Faber as a head coach, and I feel like that has been incredible for him, preparing him for the top of the division. So against Corey Sandhagen, Sandhagen, he uses range, he used volume, and eventually that began to wear down on Song Yadong, but Song he didn't look bad in that fight. And then of course you got Peter Yan also in that top 5. So I think Song matches up pretty good against Yan. I wouldn't even mind seeing him in a rematch with Corey Sandhagen. Maybe not right away, but maybe in a fight or two, maybe 2 fights from now. I would say just keep working on that wrestling defense, and he counters really well, but I'd like to see him work on his jab a little bit. I think that's one thing that could really help him, especially against like a Marab kind of fighter who has a lot of pressure. Work that jab, keep him back, keep that distance. That's what I would say. Just going to go a few more minutes here. Appreciate all your questions, James. Appreciate all these questions. Yeah, I may kind of skip a rock across some of these since I kind of want to hop in on this one championship event, working the events for the results for Tapology as well. What do you think of the game plan that Henry Cejudo and Fight Ready came up with Whaley against Rose in the rematch? Respected Dana a lot. Yeah, it was a very, very good game plan. She was so close to beating Whaley, or to beating Rose. A lot of people scored it for Whaley. I think if I remember it, I scored it 3-2 for Rose, but could change my mind if I went back and watched it again. But yeah, definitely that's the template right there. And I'd love to see another fight between Zhang Weili and Rose Namajunas. Rain, do you think it's better to stay in one camp and have stability, or do you think it's better to go around and find interesting fighters in different disciplines to train with? A little bit of a hybrid of both. I think that it's good, especially younger in your career, to look around a little bit and to see what's out there, and and then once you've kind of seen what's out there, seen how you mesh with different coaches, then try to stay with one team for a long time. Uh, I know it's going to be a case by case basis for every single fighter. Some fighters outgrow their gyms. The needs of certain fighters are not always met. Some fighters like to be in a big gym where they can get a ton of looks and have like 12 coaches to give them lots of different feedback. Other fighters like a small gym and like to just have like a few coaches, 2 to 3 coaches that are really dedicated just to them. So it depends on the fighter. I think if I was a fighter, I would want to explore around a little bit, or maybe like especially during off in between fights, maybe explore around a little bit as well too, to round out some weaknesses, because you don't want to outgrow your gym, and if you have a really grappling heavy gym, you don't want to just grow into that but neglect some other areas. So that's kind of how I would approach it. Yeah, yeah. Saying Aaron Bronstetter criticized her. Well, I mean, look at the proof is in the results. Yeah. Let's see. Wrestle Jamie. Yeah, deep flyweight tournament tourney final. That's yeah, Honda versus Fukuda on Sunday. Let's see. Gene asking if I would be angry if the UFC was secretly making Whaley versus Grasso a 125-pound title fight instead of booking the Valentina rematch in Grasso with Grasso and Whaley versus Lemos. Yeah, I mean that wouldn't make any sense. There are some pretty big rematches looming in both of those divisions for those champions. Jung versus Namajunas and Shevchenko versus Grasso. I don't get mad at a lot of things, but it wouldn't make a lot of sense. I will say that. And flyweight has no shortage of contenders ready to go. Manon Fiorot, Aaron Blanchfield, Tyler Santos, like any of those 3 fighters, along with Shevchenko, could fight for a title tomorrow. So maybe I would be a little bit upset. Why do you think that Dana said yesterday at the press conference they don't have anything lined up for Whaley? Probably just they don't have anything done yet. I would think it could depend on something with those 2 fighters. Could also depend on the venue. They may be trying to book that fight for a specific venue, and they don't have anything done for the venue. If it's a Singapore thing, maybe they don't have the venue done for that. So could be a couple moving pieces there. Let's see if there's anyone. I so appreciate all of you like asking so many questions. I wish I could get to all these, but I do have to hop off in a few minutes. So try to hit some folks that haven't gotten a question yet. Same question about Jong as every stream. Jan is fighting this weekend. Sure. Y'all do get a lot, sometimes a lot of repeat questions, but let's see. Okay, so are you a fan of Henry Cejudo, Chris? My leader, Slacky J, said, despite all the memes, they prepare for their fighters specifically for the opponents. Am I a fan of Henry Cejudo outside the cage? Not so much. Yeah, I'll just say that. He's hard for me to stomach. I don't really listen to like any of the pre-fight stuff with him. It's hard for me to listen to. But in the cage, he's exciting. He prepares extremely well. Really smart fighter. Man, you just go back to the Demetrius Johnson versus Henry Cejudo fight, the second one, and just all that he had adjusted to and how big of a win that is. I don't think people really realize how big of an upset and how big of a win that was. The fact that Henry Cejudo was rematching a fighter that had already beat him, knocked him out in the first round, he came back and won a split decision against one of the most dominant champions ever in the UFC, one of the pound for pound greats ever. That was such a big win. And he's looked so good ever since then. And it was so anticlimactic when he kind of fake retired against who was that? Cruz? Yeah, at in 2020. So anticlimactic. Felt like he had so much more to offer. But I lean towards him in this fight with Aljamain Sterling. I really do. And I know Sterling often gets overlooked, but uh, it's hard for me to pick against Cejudo now. Very interesting that he's fighting the same weekend within less than 24 hours of Demetrius Johnson. So those two kind of paired with each other. Very interesting that they're fighting in such close proximity. But that is it for me for this week. Again, thank you so much for the questions. Wish I could get to all of them. And I will be hopping over to the One Fight Night 10 stream on Amazon Prime. Excited for that. Lots of great fights. I'll be giving coverage on my Twitter, on my Instagram, same handle, MMA Ecosystem. And if you haven't already, subscribe to the channel, like if you enjoyed it. I'll be back next week with more goodness. So until then, enjoy the fights, everybody.